Welcome back to another development sprint for Pixel Art Academy Learn Mode. I am very excited because we finally get to the next element of art. It's gonna be shape. I'm very excited. Now we get back to learning content directly about drawing. We've done line, next up is shape, and I've been designing the lessons for this. I was also designing the big picture of all of the elements of art that come ahead and how they will connect to each other. We'll look at that at the end, but now let's take a look at all of the tasks. Pretty straightforward. We're just gonna go one by one and create them all. All right, let's get to work and let's do some of these tutorial lessons. The progress is going good so far, so let's just jump into the few lessons that I made. So after you complete the elements of art line, you now get the shape section. If you want to start to learn how to draw, you only need to draw these three basic shapes. Here we have a little square. It's also gonna go the same for rectangles, and we have a triangle, and then finally we have the circle. And this is taking me quite a bit of time to do. By the way, if you have sharp eyes, you would have noticed that this is in fact the Steam capsule, this one right here that you get to see here. And then the game will show you how you can combine these basic shapes to create different objects. And so at this point I realized that yeah, this is going to be quite cumbersome, annoying to have to draw all of these circles by hand, and it's also not the point for this tutorial section. There's a whole circles drawing in pixel art in the pixel art lines section or curves, so yeah, this is really unnecessary at this point to be doing all of this work here. And so I created something that I was planning to do for a while now. Here I've added three new tools: the line, the rectangle, and the ellipse. If I enable them as the game recompiles and we get back here, yes, now we have a ruler here. Simply go here, select, these are the three options that it gives you, and you can just draw a circle just like this. I want to add the option of being able to move. If you press space to move the circle, here you see I'm one off. Right now I don't have that yet. I want to add that functionality if I have the time, but still so much quicker to just add circles like this. Because the point here really isn't to be looking and doing pixel perfect circles. It should be more about, hey, what's the general idea of combining shapes like this? And as you are drawing this, you also get written what you've been drawing, just in case it's not obvious. This one is a little bit tricky. It's a palm tree, but once you add in details, which will be one of the future tutorials, it'll make more sense. Now these tools have various options. If you hold shift, it'll constrain the thing to a square or to a circle, and then if you hold command or control, it draws the item from center out as well. And also I've made it so that if you hold shift, I will actually give you specially chosen circles that I think look better than what the default Bresenham algorithm creates. For example, how a circle would be done with Bresenham's algorithm, and then I manually, if you press shift, to constrain to a circle. So this is the default ellipse algorithm, and yeah, sometimes it gives you this more octagonal shape. So holding down shift, at least for shapes smaller than 30, I have manually chosen a nicer pixelations of circles, at least in my opinion. And then finally we have a lesson where you apply what you've just learned here to a reference. So you'll be able to choose multiple different options. Right now I just have this one here. You will know this one if you've ever done the lessons in my study guide. And if you need to know the study guide, if you go to pixelart.academy, the study guide is this third thing of the game. Besides adventure mode and learn mode, there is the study guide, which is a free selection of articles, because I want all of the knowledge that you can learn from the game. I want it to be freely accessible so that knowledge isn't kept behind a paywall. And if you've ever done landscape sketching from this book, you will know that, because yeah, here this principle about shapes is explained. Here's the three shapes and the line, circle and the triangle, and here it shows how from this scene you can simplify a scene like this into simple shapes, and then here you see this, you've just created this. So yeah, what you're learning through these lessons is taken from the landscape sketching book, but I have a bunch of more lessons to do, so let's get into it, and I'll see you at the end of the sprint. Okay, so maybe it's not going to be exactly the end of the sprint quite here, because there are some important lessons that I still want to do that I haven't done, but let's take a look at 2 new ones that I have. I spent a bunch of time making sure that you have choices. Even for a previous lesson, I added another scene that you can do, and here the same for detailing. For the next one, I wanted you to have a choice of at least 2 images. So here we have a little church, a little temple. The point of this lesson is that the basic shapes here are a starting point. So we can do a bunch of triangles and squares and rectangles from where we draw more complicated shapes. So the previous step, when we are just outlining things with these basic shapes, it's not like this is the final end result. So the detailing step asks us to add details and clean up unneeded lines. So for example, here we don't need the full circle to make it look cool. We just need these ones, and sometimes we can go a little bit away from the basic shape. And then we slowly build up the image. In reality, I would be looking here at the reference. This will especially make sense when you're doing sighting, when you're trying to get the proportions right. Of course, here during these missions, you're still just given for free the lines to draw over, but eventually this will go away and you will have to do your own sighting, make your own initial lines. For that, there will be a separate editor that will mimic working at an easel. But yeah, for now, you just get to experience this drawing process that goes from more rough shapes and then slowly building in and bringing in the detail. If I cheat through these steps, we get to the final result. You could also add the church, and then you can also draw the church right next to it. But yeah, I'll leave that to you to figure out. The next mission goes into organic shapes, and I will actually split. I was going to include 4 references. I will actually split it down to 2 and 2. For now, this organic shapes goes over drawing characters, and I'll separate out a one for drawing plants. But the difference here is you actually get the blue color that makes it even more obvious how this is meant. The basic shapes are meant as a guideline where other things are then placed over. Now, it is true that in practice I wouldn't be doing this with a shape tool. I would be just sketching it out freehand, something like this. But for now, as you're learning about the shapes, it's okay, I think. Once you're done with the blue underlying thing, now we get to actually draw the organic shapes that go over the basic shapes, and we can reuse some of these lines as they were drawn, whereas for others we have to go a little bit off the grid of what we have done previously. Like here we go across these 2 circles, but then we connect them in a more organic way together. Let's give this Cheshire cat some eyes, and of course the famous grin. Finally, we need to get rid of all of this blue stuff. It's the temporary, the guidelines, and yeah, later on in the more advanced editor you will be the one drawing those own guidelines on a separate layer, so you will not have to do this step. And there we have it. Hope you enjoyed this little cat. There's another reference in there. So while I've done all of the high priority stuff, at least organic shapes, I want to split into that second lesson. I want to do that one. Maybe I'll pick a couple of these ones up, and I also want to get these lessons tested out with people, not just myself. It's very important for me to know how new players will see these things. So yeah, we'll do another extension and see how it looks like at the end. Ah yes, here we are at the end of the sprint, and I'm happy. Some good lessons. We have 3 more. Let's check them out. So after we're done with the basic shapes and combining them together, I want to show you that the basic shapes can also appear in a little bit different configurations. By the way, I've also made it so that if you press the space key, you can move the thing around, so you don't have to completely, if you mess up a little bit, you can move it. I really wanted to do this extra one because in the next, the one with the basic shapes breakdown, the other ones, these transform shapes do appear, so I just wanted to get you a little bit accustomed to them before you go straight into this drawing. And now after you've done the detail step, another one I wanted to do is solid shapes, because so far we've only been drawing shapes as empty, hollow things, but you can also color them in. I wanted to indicate, to show how these shapes look like, because it appears later on in the fan art challenge and also in the lessons with the Mickey Mouse. I also wanted to include one lesson where it just shows how shapes can be used for placement. Now, if you remember to this one, a lot of people, I've tested the game and everyone was not happy with my little palm tree. They didn't see how that is a palm tree. However, here this tutorial actually shows you have two choices. In case you choose this first reference, you'll see exactly how that can represent the palm tree. Here we have it, just like in the previous example. And here you can see you can use the circle as your guide of where do the individual parts, individual leaves of this palm tree reach. So sometimes even when you see a shape like this, I know it's not super obvious, but this, you can see this whole crown, the whole leaf here, this whole bush, you can see it as a circle, and that'll help you especially later on when you will try to do sighting and you will be trying to position different things in the scene properly on the paper. So that's it. That is the selection of lessons for element of art shape. This shows an extra step of how as artists we start with the broad strokes and then slowly refine things and detail them out, but it all starts with just very big shapes, blobs. Now, I did say we will do one more thing today, and that will be looking at the rest of learn mode. I've made a whole plan of it. Previously, I've had various plans of how I want to do all of the knowledge in learn mode, how I want to organize it. It was just dispersed in all of these different drawings in my notebook, and I just wanted to make one big document where I can see the big picture of the whole thing, and then also do some analysis of, okay, which things should I prioritize. So it all starts with the pixel art tools, like this is all that was and still is in the demo for Pixel Art Academy, followed by element of art line. This is what has been in the game so far on early access launch, and then we've been, with your feedback, refining all of this once, improving the theory lessons, adding different features you've asked for. But now it is time to move on to the next element of art, shape. So today in this update you are receiving the original, the main tutorial for the shape, and then this is where things will then branch off to different things like simplification and shape language. I wanted to give you another game to work on, so it'd be like a Space Invaders clone. And because I don't want to just keep on drawing lines, shapes with one color, I did want to design the thing so you can then after this go to element of art color, so things can become a little bit more interesting. So you don't just have the Macintosh that is black and white, but you get the Pixel Vision computer. And then the second route you might be taking is, instead of going to the color, you can go towards form. But before we get to form, you will have to first learn how to sketch, because so far you've always been given lines where to draw over. But once it gets to here, now you have to start looking at the reference and drawing those guiding lines yourself. And once you know how to sketch like that, you will then go and look at three-dimensional objects to figure out, well, what kind of form they have, and then try to draw them directly from reference. Both form and shape elements will lead to a chess game, because in the 80s especially, chess games often had, you could switch between 2D and 3D mode. So it's kind of a fun little project to learn how to both draw the simplified abstract chess pieces in 2D pixel art, and also how to draw pieces a little bit more in perspective, really looking at their 3D shape and trying to draw them. Also, once you're in the art studio and you know how to position things, look at the 3D models and stuff, you will also be able to compose your own little scenes, which leads then to the element of art space, where you will be able to work on your compositions, on how you are placing things in the 3D world. That is another element of art. And once you have both color and form together, you can then also start placing lighting. So not only you can move the objects around in your scene, you also get different lights in your art studio that you can position to create different lighting scenarios. And once you have a light, you should start understanding how light affects items, materials, so how shading works. That is the element of art value, how dark or light things are. And finally, after all of this is done, once you understand how light affects different surfaces, we can go down into texture, whereas different materials have different colorations or the forms have more details, which then creates the feeling of texture. And then from these two, there will be also two main fundamentals of pixel art: aliasing and dithering. Now, a bunch of these tutorials I did have to put in this little dotted lines, dashed and dotted by priority. So the ones in the dots were the first one to get cut, and the one with the dashes, I would really like to have them, but it would take just too much time, at least for the first version of learn mode. I want to come to a point where all of the elements of art are covered in a reasonable amount of time, and then once that is all done, once the whole kind of big picture with all the things that you should learn, they have its place in this big picture, then we can go and add more lessons, more tutorials in each one of these sections, more projects. If you like the game, if the game keeps doing okay, then we can just keep on adding more and more content. Now still, this will take a lot of time, even just with these main sprints. There's a lot of sprints. Each one of these sprints essentially is one more of these devlogs, and yeah, it'll be a bunch of work. But as always, you'll get to see it here first, completely transparent development. You can also drop by my Discord, ask questions, see updates, or support me on Patreon as well. Otherwise, see you in the new build on Steam. All right, cheers.